Welcome back, Summoners! Today we have some huge news. I'm Kangas, and Riot finally released patch 2.1a for Wild Rift, bringing much needed balance changes to the game. Although it's considered a mini patch, this update fixes many issues in Wild Rift, alongside bringing a new champion into the game. But before we dive into the meat of the video, here's our question of the day. Who do y'all think would be the best dancer? And yes, KDA members can be included. Call me biased, I think it's Braum, but let me know your answer in the comments below. So let's take a stab at the patch notes first, by beginning our discussion with the release of Katarina, the Sinister Blade. In the next upcoming days, Riot announced that players will be able to acquire this new champion through missions. For those who've been playing Wild Rift for a while, this procedure should seem rather routine by now. Complete all the missions and unlock the champion. That easy. Katarina's kit revolves around dashing around the map, utilizing her daggers to maximize her damage output. Her DPS is incredibly high once she learns her ultimate, which allows her to spin in a circle, dealing area of effect damage. Takedowns decrease all of her active cooldowns, allowing for incredible snowball potential. As an AP carry who excels in teamfights, the release of Katarina is sure to shake up the mid lane matchups quite a bit. If by some chance she releases rather weak, which I doubt she will, Riot is guaranteed to buff her up as they always do for newer champions on the Wild Rift. More information on the Katarina event will be announced by Riot at a later date. Moving on to champion balance, starting with champion buffs. Hopefully the first of these buffs shouldn't be too much of a pain in the Ashe. Get it. Ashe's lane pressure is pretty strong, but she's been falling slightly behind other top tier AD carry picks in teamfights. To compensate for this, Riot decreased the Ranger's focus cooldown from 8, 7, 6, and 5 seconds to 7, 6, 5, and 4 seconds. Albeit small, this change should allow for Ashe to consistently utilize the attack speed buff in teamfights, making her mid to late game a tad bit stronger. This should give her more priority and power in teamfights overall, as she'll be able to more reliably count on her attack speed buff. And Riot clearly wants their newest AD carry champion Xayah to be meta, shown through the biggest buffs in this mini patch update. Her first skill, Double Dagger, was increased to 50, 75, 100, and 125. This specific buff targets her early game damage, allowing her poke to be more significant in the lane phase. Meanwhile, her 2 ability, Deadly Plumage, was her most lackluster ability before, but in the new patch update, they buffed it from the original 25, 30, 35, and 40% attack speed to 35, 40, 45, and 50%, a total of 10% difference at each level. This will let her throw out daggers at a much faster rate. And her third ability, Blade Caller, was also buffed from 12, 11, 10, and 9 seconds down to 11, 10, 9, and 8 seconds. And the AD ratio went from 0.6 to 0.8, meaning she'll be able to bring in her feathers more often and for more damage. Her ult Featherstorm's base damage also increased from the 100, 200, and 300 marks to 125, 250, and 375. Effectively marking a buff on every one of her active abilities. With these balance updates, Xayah might no longer be balanced, so try her out if you haven't. Vayne sits as one of the worst AD carry picks for the duo lane, with little to no lane pressure to allow her to scale properly into the late game. She suffers the most from the Blade of the Ruin changes from this patch, shown later on in the video. Riot decided to buff her third and last ability to compensate. Condemn now deals 105, 145, 185, and 225 damage on terrain. And Final Hour is now on a 90, 75, and 60 second cooldown. These buffs reward only the fanciest Vayne plays and are honestly pretty small and do not compensate for the nerfs on Blade of the Ruin King. Vayne will almost definitely remain as a not so great pick. When Wild Rift first released its open beta, Ezreal was giga busted. Scares me just remembering that time. But after many nerfs and other champion releases, the flamboyant AD carry was set aside, placed consistently in the A and B tiers. Riot decided to give back some of the damage on his first ability, Mystic Shot, back to the original 20, 55, 90, and 125 damage that it was at before. Despite this buff, I doubt that we'll have to worry about Ezreal being overpowered again anytime soon. Varus is the last AD carry buff from patch 2.1a. He's still not in a great spot, but they buffed his one ability, Piercing Arrow cooldown, to 16, 14, 12, and 10 seconds, allowing him to spam the ability a bit more often. Maybe this will give him the nudge needed to finally become a viable pick, giving him a small spotlight in the meta. With all the other AD carry changes implemented in this patch, one thing is for certain: the top tier dragon picks are about to change. Next up is Darius, who has been slightly underperforming in the higher elos. Experienced players have grown accustomed to countering him, and so Riot buffed his first and third abilities to help him out. Decimate now heals 15 to 45% of missing health, and Apprehend, slow duration, now lasts 1.5 seconds instead of the previous 1 second, which signifies a whopping 50% increase. Sounds a little different when you think of it that way. These two abilities are essential for Darius's kit, and the extra healing on his first ability means that he can trade more efficiently in the laning phase and survive longer when diving in the middle of a teamfight. Meanwhile, the elongated slow duration is extra crowd control, an element of extreme importance in Wild Rift. This means that he'll now be stronger in all stages of the game, and while it's too early to tell if these changes will push him into the top tier picks, Darius will, without a doubt, benefit greatly this update. And that concludes the buffs to champions, so let's move on to the nerfs. If y'all have been watching any of our videos discussing overpowered picks, you'll know that Lulu, Miss Fortune, and Olaf have all been recently overperforming. Thankfully, Riot caught wind of these and balanced all three in today's patch update. First up is Lulu. Despite being slightly nerfed in the hotfix a couple of days ago, Riot is taking another go at balancing the Phase Sorceress. With her base health decreased to 520 and movement speed decreased to 325, her survivability in lane is directly affected. She is squishier and easier to catch, making her a juicy target for enemy engagers. Her second ability, Whimsy, duration now lasts 1.25, 1.5, and 1.75 seconds. Her third ability, Help Picks, shield duration also now lasts 2.5 seconds, and the cast range decreased to 6. Her ultimate cast range was also decreased to 7. These updates absolutely gut Lulu's dueling potential. Nerfing Lulu's ability range forces her to stand closer to the combat, increasing her liability in a teamfight. This is a much needed change though, as before Lulu could heavily impact a skirmish from an absurdly long distance away. No longer can players abuse her pixie broken ass magic without a dilly-dally care in the world. These are great changes and should allow for different support picks to finally shine in the duo lane. Miss Fortune has also been in our overpowered AD carry picks for quite some time now. Thanks to her lane dominance and teamfight prowess, she simply did not have any weak points in the game. Riot addressed this directly by nerfing her base armor to 30, base health regen to 6, and base health regen per level 2.55, which means 14 at max level. These changes allow for other damage dealers to effectively trade against her better, providing more risk for her dueling potential. Similar to the Lulu nerfs, Miss Fortune is now a very squishy, very vulnerable target for the enemy team. Additionally, her passive Love Tap now deals 50% damage on minions rather than the full 100%, taking away a large chunk of her pushing potential. This heavily impacts Miss Fortune's laning phase, as minion wave management is essential to controlling the early game. Though her teamfight damage numbers were left unchanged, thanks to today's patch, Miss Fortune has an actual weakness to exploit, bumping down her a peg or two in the tier list. In addition to the other marksman changes from this patch update, the duo lane is about to look vastly different, so keep an eye on our future videos to guide you through these upcoming shifts in the meta. Olaf has been rolling the enemy team way too often, definitely warranting these nerfs. His base armor was decreased to 35, base AD to 64, and his first ability Undertow's slow decreased to 20, 25, 30, and 35% for 2 seconds. One of the biggest issues with fighting in Olaf was attempting to run away from his eternal slows, while he picked up speed and ignored crowd control. This made for an extremely scary situation for Olaf's victims. The nerf on his first ability grants more opportunity to escape the axe-throwing berserker, while his base armor and AD decreases leave him more susceptible to 1v1 fights. Enemy junglers should now be capable of trading with Olaf rather than having to resort to avoiding him completely. Though his other damage numbers were untouched as a bruiser, these nerfed stats were essential for pushing him above the other picks in his role. And that concludes the champion balances, bringing us to the next topic, itemization. As mentioned before, Blade of the Ruined King is receiving changes. The item has become a staple in many marksman builds, even when the effect did not seem to synergize with their kits, a telltale sign of a broken item. The attack damage was decreased to 20, attack speed increased to 35%, and melee users now deal 9% instead of 6% current health physical damage on hit. Ranged users gained the unchanged 6%. The movement speed drain duration was meanwhile decreased from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. In regards to ranged champions, marksmen who prioritize attack speed will find the item useful still, but the attack damage nerfs may be a deal breaker for others. Also, Riot is attempting to shift the item to suit melee champions a little more, but whether this will be successful or not, only time will tell. And our next items up are Liandry's Torment and Haunting Guise, AP options that have been overpowered in light of the recent meta. Haunting Guise provided way too much AP and utility for an incomplete item, and combining to create Liandry's granted too strong of a power spike. Liandry's Torment's ability power was decreased to 70, with the total cost unchanged at 3150. However, the combined cost of Blasting Wand and Haunting Guise is increased to 950 gold. Therefore, Haunting Guise AP is decreased to 25, and the total gold decreased to 1300, and upgrade cost decreased to 800. This seems overwhelming to think about, but most of these nerfs target Liandry's rather than Haunting Guise, simply having the numbers adjusted for this smaller item to accommodate for the bigger ones. A decrease in 20 ability power is massive though, and having the combined cost increased means prudently having to save up for a power spike, which is not nearly as powerful as it used to be. This nerf affects the prioritization of the item, making it a better second or third item rather than a first. And that concludes the item changes, bringing us into the new skins. To celebrate the launch of Katarina, we're getting 2 Katarina skins, Bilgewater and Deathsworn. Alongside these, the Omega Squad is making a debut on the Wild Rift, with Omega Squad Fizz, Omega Squad Teemo, and Omega Squad Tristana. These heavy-duty alternate reality fighters are sure to bring some new visuals to Wild Rift. And of course, we have some attention to one of my favorite champions in the form of a new skin, El Tigre Braum. Last but not least, we have the addition of the colorful Super Galaxy Shyvana, a futuristic take on the fire-breathing dragon. Free-to-play champions from March 4th to March 10th are Aurelion Sol, Fiora, Gragas, Kai'Sa, Lee Sin, Lulu, Sona, Teemo, Tristana, and Twisted Fate. And the champions from March 11th through the 17th are Alistar, Amumu, Braum, Camille, Evelynn, Jhin, Seraphine, Singed, Vayne, and Yasuo. And that concludes our patch 2.1a rundown. To keep up with more Wild Rift news coverage, be sure to click like and subscribe, and don't forget to address the question of the day in the comments down below. As always, best of luck in the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.